The typewriter jammed at exactly the wrong moment. Or perhaps the right one. When the ribbon tore, it revealed something impossible, the same numbers, printed twice, days apart. In that tiny flaw lay the secret that would sink 4 aircraft carriers and save thousands of lives in just 5 hours. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning of May 25, 1942, started like any other morning in the code room. But by the time the sun set that day, one small discovery would begin a chain of events that would sink 4 aircraft carriers and save thousands of American lives. In a concrete building in Honolulu, Hawaii, men sat at desks covered in paper. The room had no windows. Electric fans hummed constantly, trying to cool the hot machines. The air smelled of burnt rubber and cigarette smoke. These men were trying to break a code. Not just any code, the main code used by the Imperial Japanese Navy. It was called JN-25B. Every day, radio operators around the Pacific listened to Japanese ships talking to each other. They wrote down everything they heard. But it was all in code. Numbers. 5-digit numbers, groups of them, thousands of groups. 345218839212847902234. The numbers went on and on. They meant nothing. Or rather, they meant everything, if only someone could read them. The Japanese system was brilliant. First, they had a secret book. In this book, every 5-digit number stood for a word or phrase. For example, 34521 might mean aircraft carrier, 88392 might mean attack, 12847 might mean tomorrow. But the Japanese did not stop there. After encoding their message with the code book, they added another layer. They took each 5-digit group and added another random 5-digit number to it. This was called an additive key. So even if America somehow got the code book, the messages would still be gibberish. The key changed every day. Sometimes every few hours. For 6 months, the best minds in American intelligence had tried to break this code. Mathematicians, language experts, code breakers. They all failed. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, knew they were fighting blind. Japanese ships moved freely across thousands of miles of ocean. They attacked without warning. Pearl Harbor had been destroyed. The Philippines had fallen. Singapore was gone. And America could not see them coming. The pressure in the code room was unbearable. Every day brought new intercepted messages. Every day, the men tried to find patterns. Every day, they failed. Commander Joseph Rockefort led the team in Honolulu. He was a strange man, brilliant but odd. He spoke in riddles and quotes from old books. He slept on a cot in his office. He wore a smoking jacket instead of his uniform because he said it helped him think. But even Rockefort was losing hope. "We are fighting ghosts," he wrote in his diary. "We see their shadows but never their faces." By May 1942, something changed. The Japanese radio traffic increased. Messages flew back and forth between Tokyo and ships at sea. The code breakers noticed 2 letters appearing again and again, AF. Send supplies to AF. Air patrol over AF on June 3. Carrier Division 1 will arrive near AF. The analysts believed AF was Midway, a small island 1,200 miles northwest of Hawaii. America's last defense before the mainland. But Admiral Nimitz demanded proof. He could not risk his few remaining aircraft carriers on a guess. America had only 3 carriers left in the Pacific. Japan had many more. "Give me proof," Nimitz said. "Show me that AF means Midway. Until then, we wait." The code breakers worked harder. They worked 18-hour shifts. They drank coffee until their hands shook. They stared at numbers until their eyes burned. But the code would not break. What they needed was a miracle. Or a mistake. They were about to get both. Her name was Margaret Howard. She was 24 years old. She had brown hair that she kept pinned back. She wore a navy uniform that was always pressed and clean. Nobody paid much attention to her. She was a typist. One of dozens of women who had been hired after Pearl Harbor to help with paperwork. The Navy called them clerical assistants. Most people just called them the typing pool. Before the war, Margaret had worked as a bookkeeper in Chicago. She was good with numbers and could spot patterns in ledgers. Margaret was assigned to the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific in Hawaii. She was told to report at 6 a.m. every morning and never discuss her work with anyone. Margaret's job was simple. Men would hand her sheets of paper covered with 5-digit numbers, the intercepted Japanese messages. She would retype them neatly so the code breakers could read them more easily. She was not supposed to think about the numbers. She was not supposed to ask questions. She was supposed to type and stay quiet. The men in the code room treated her politely but distantly. To them, she was just part of the furniture, useful but invisible. Margaret lived in a converted dormitory near the base. She woke up before dawn every day. She walked to work while the streets were still dark. The guards at the gate barely looked at her. Women came and went by the hundreds. Inside the code room, the noise never stopped. Machines clattered. Men shouted. Margaret sat at her desk in the corner and typed. The work was mind-numbing. Hour after hour of 5 digits, space, 5 digits, space. Her fingers moved automatically. After 2 weeks, she started to notice something odd. Certain groups of numbers appeared over and over. Not in the same message. But across different messages, on different days. At first, she thought it was her imagination. But she kept seeing it. The same 5 digits. Then a few lines later, almost the same 5 digits, but one number different. 34521, then later. 34,521 88,392. Then later. 88,391. It was like seeing the same word spelled 2 different ways. As if someone had made a typing mistake. Margaret had worked as a bookkeeper before the war. She was good with numbers. She knew what patterns looked like. And this felt like a pattern. But she said nothing. She was just a typist. The men around her were experts, mathematicians, university professors, code breakers. If they had not seen this pattern, it probably meant nothing. So she kept typing. Her typewriter was an Underwood Standard, black and heavy. The ribbon inside was worn thin from constant use. It was supposed to be replaced every few days, but supplies were scarce. So ribbons were used until they were almost transparent. After hours of typing, she noticed something else. When she typed the same numbers repeatedly, the ribbon left darker marks. Sometimes she could see faint, ghost letters beneath the fresh ink, shadows from previous pages. One afternoon in late May, she was typing a long message when the typewriter jammed with a sharp metallic snap. She lifted the platen and saw the problem. The ribbon had torn straight through the middle. She reached for a new ribbon, but something made her pause. The torn ribbon hung from the machine, and along the torn edge, she saw something strange. 2 sequences of numbers. Almost identical, but printed at different times. One above the other, the ghost impression from an earlier page, and the fresh ink from today. 34,521 34,521. The same 5 digits, exactly the same. Margaret's heart started beating faster. She carefully removed the torn ribbon and laid it flat on her desk under the lamp. She looked at the papers on her desk, the messages she had typed over the past few days. She started comparing them. There it was. Again and again, the same 5-digit groups, repeating across different messages, always separated by about 12 lines. She pulled out older pages from her filing drawer. The pattern was there too. Like music notes repeating in a hidden song. Margaret sat very still. She did not know much about code breaking. But she knew one thing: codes are supposed to be random. If something repeats, it means something went wrong. She looked around the room. The men were bent over their desks, smoking and muttering to themselves. None of them had noticed. Should she say something? Would they laugh at her? She folded the torn ribbon carefully and put it in an envelope. Then she marked the pages where she had seen the patterns, tiny pencil dots in the margins. That evening, she stayed late. She compared more messages. The pattern was real. Every 12 lines, the same clusters of numbers returned. Finally, she gathered her courage. She approached a young officer named Lieutenant Davis. He was one of the friendlier ones. "Sir," she said quietly. "I think I found something. It's probably nothing." She showed him the pages with her pencil marks. She showed him the torn ribbon. Davis frowned. He studied the papers for a long time. "Wait here," he said. 20 minutes later, he returned with Commander Rockefort. Rockefort looked terrible. He had not shaved in days. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. But when he saw the ribbon and the marked pages, something changed in his face. He examined everything carefully. Then he looked at Margaret. "Where did you learn to do this?" he asked. I just noticed it, sir. While typing." Rockefort smiled, a tired, thin smile. "You noticed what my entire team of experts missed." He turned to Davis. "Get the full analysis team. Now." That night, Margaret's discovery started a chain reaction that would change the war. Rockefort called an emergency meeting. He spread Margaret's marked pages across the table. He held up the torn ribbon like evidence in a trial. "Gentlemen," he said, "we've been looking for a door into this code. Miss Howard just found us the keyhole." The team gathered around. They examined the patterns Margaret had found. At first, some were skeptical. "It could be coincidence," one analyst said. "Random chance." But as they checked more messages, the truth became clear. The same 5-digit groups were repeating. Not randomly. In a pattern, every 12 lines. One of the mathematicians figured it out first. "They're reusing the additive key," he said quietly. "The Japanese operators are making mistakes." The room went silent. The Japanese code system depended on one crucial thing: every additive key had to be used only once. If a key was ever repeated, even once, it created a weakness. And the Japanese radio operators, tired, working long hours, just like the Americans, were human. They made mistakes. They reused keys. Usually, these mistakes would be impossible to spot. The messages were too long, too complex. But Margaret's typewriter ribbon had captured them. The ghost impressions showed what the human eye could not see: 2 messages encrypted with the same key. And if 2 messages used the same key, they could be compared. Subtracted from each other. The encryption would cancel out, revealing the original Japanese words underneath. "It's like having 2 locked doors with the same key," Davis explained to Margaret later. "If we know what's behind one door, we can figure out what's behind the other." The team worked through the night. They took the messages Margaret had marked. They compared them. They did the mathematics. And slowly, piece by piece, words began to appear. Aircraft. Attack. Carrier division. They were breaking JN 25B. Over the next week, the entire code room focused on Margaret's discovery. They built tables of repeated additive groups. They reconstructed parts of the Japanese code book. Every day brought new breakthroughs. Margaret continued typing, but now the men asked her opinion. They showed her new intercepts and asked if she saw patterns. Look at this one, Miss Howard. Does this match anything you've seen? She was no longer invisible. Not everyone was happy about it. One senior analyst complained to Rockefort, "You're basing operational intelligence on a clerk's observation. That's dangerous." Rockefort's reply was sharp, "I'm basing it on good analysis. I don't care where it came from." By June 1st, they had translated enough messages to piece together something terrifying. Japan was planning a massive attack. For aircraft carriers, dozens of support ships, hundreds of planes. The target was confirmed, Midway Island. But they had something more important than just the target. They had the date. June 4, 1942. Dawn attack. Rockefort took his findings to Admiral Nimitz. Nimitz read the report twice. Then he looked up at Rockefort. "Are you certain?" "Yes, sir. The code is breaking. They're coming to Midway. 4 carriers. June 4. Nimitz made his decision immediately. "We'll be waiting for them." Admiral Nimitz had 3 aircraft carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown. Yorktown was badly damaged from an earlier battle. Engineers estimated repairs would take 3 months. Nimitz told them they had 3 days. Workers swarmed the ship around the clock. In 72 hours, Yorktown was ready to sail. Nimitz sent all 3 carriers toward Midway, positioning them carefully northeast of the island, hidden, waiting. The American carriers arrived on June 2, 2 days before the expected Japanese attack. They took position at what was called Point Luck, a spot in the ocean carefully chosen to be within striking range of Midway, but far enough away to avoid Japanese scout planes. The carriers sailed in complete radio silence. No transmissions. No lights at night. They did not want to give away their position. On the carriers, pilots prepared for battle. Mechanics checked engines. Ordnance crews loaded bombs and torpedoes. Everyone knew this was it, the battle that would decide the Pacific War. Many of the pilots were young, barely out of training. Some had never seen combat. They wrote letters home and tucked them away, just in case. The Japanese had no idea they were there. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto commanded the Japanese fleet. He was one of Japan's greatest naval minds who had studied at Harvard. He had actually opposed war with America, warning Japan could not win a long conflict. But now he was trying to win quickly before America's factories turned the tide. His strategy was simple: draw out the remaining American carriers and destroy them. With America's carriers gone, Japan would control the Pacific. It was a good plan based on one assumption, that America did not know it was coming. Japan's carriers were legendary: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. These were the same ships that had attacked Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier. They had never lost a battle. Akagi was the flagship, a massive carrier with a distinctive downward-sloping flight deck. Admiral Tsuchinagumo commanded from its bridge. He was the same admiral who had led the Pearl Harbor attack. The 4 carriers together could launch over 200 aircraft. They had the best pilots in the world, veterans with hundreds of hours of combat experience. They had destroyed British ships in the Indian Ocean. They had dominated the Pacific for 6 months. They seemed invincible. On June 3, Japanese ships approached Midway from the northwest, exactly as the code breakers had predicted. Back in Honolulu, Margaret and the code team monitored the radio traffic. They heard Japanese messages being sent. They decoded them in near real time. Enemy heading 320 degrees. Distance 150 miles. Many planes. Everything was happening exactly as the decoded messages had said. Margaret sat at her desk, typing the latest intercepts. Her hands trembled slightly. The numbers she was typing represented real ships, real planes, real men about to die. She thought about the torn ribbon locked in Rockefort's safe. Such a small thing, just a piece of fabric. And now thousands of lives hung on what it had revealed. At 6 a.m. on June 4, Japanese planes took off from their carriers. They flew toward Midway to bomb the island. 108 aircraft, bombers and fighters, rose into the dawn sky. They formed up and headed southeast. Their mission was to destroy Midway's airfield and defenses. On Midway, radar operators saw them coming. Air raid sirens wailed. Marine pilots scrambled to their planes. Anti-aircraft guns swung toward the sky. The Japanese bombers hit Midway hard. They destroyed buildings, cratered the runway, and set fuel tanks on fire. But the American defenses fought back. They shot down several Japanese planes. More importantly, they survived. The airfield was damaged but still operational. And the Japanese had not seen any American carriers. But while Japanese planes were attacking Midway, American carriers launched their own attack. Dive bombers and torpedo planes flew toward the Japanese fleet. The American carriers had launched everything they had, every available plane. Some were older models, barely adequate for combat. But Nimitz was betting everything on this moment. The first American planes to find the Japanese fleet were torpedo bombers. They flew low and slow, carrying heavy torpedoes. They were easy targets. Japanese fighters swarmed them. Anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. One by one, the American torpedo bombers were shot down. Out of 41 torpedo bombers launched, 35 were destroyed. They hit nothing. It looked like a disaster. But those torpedo bombers had done something crucial. They had drawn all the Japanese fighters down to sea level, chasing them. Which meant the sky above was empty. The Japanese were caught completely off guard. At 10:20 a.m., American dive bombers reached the Japanese carriers. The carriers were in the middle of rearming their planes. Their decks were crowded with aircraft, fuel lines, and bombs. The dive bombers attacked from 14,000 feet. They dove almost straight down, picking up speed, the wind screaming past their wings. It was the perfect moment. The Japanese carriers were completely vulnerable. The American planes dove. Bombs fell. The first bomb hit Akagi near the center of the flight deck. It penetrated to the hangar deck below, where planes were being armed and fueled. The explosion ignited aviation fuel. Fire spread instantly. Within seconds, more bombs hit Akagi. Bombs that were stacked on the deck for loading exploded. Torpedoes cooked off. The entire ship became an inferno. Kaga was hit next. Multiple bombs struck the carrier. One hit the bridge, killing most of the senior officers. Others hit the flight deck, turning it into twisted metal. Fires raged out of control. Soryu took 3 direct hits in rapid succession. The bombs went through the wooden flight deck like it was paper. Explosions tore through the ship's interior. Within minutes, the carrier was listing heavily. In 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers were burning, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. The dive bomber pilots had done what the torpedo bombers could not. They had destroyed 3 of Japan's finest carriers in less time than it takes to eat breakfast. On Akagi, Admiral Nagumo stood on the bridge, stunned. His flagship was on fire. All around him, men were shouting, running, burning. He had to be physically pulled away by his staff and taken to a cruiser. Damage control teams tried to fight the fires, but it was hopeless. The carriers were full of fuel and ammunition. Every few minutes, another explosion would rock the ships. On Kaga, the captain tried to save his ship. He ordered flooding of the magazines to prevent explosions. But the fires were too intense. Men jumped into the ocean to escape the heat. The 4th carrier, Hiryu, was further away. It had not been hit in the first attack. It was Japan's last chance. Hiryu fought back. It damaged the Yorktown badly. But later that afternoon, American planes found Hiryu and destroyed it too. Dive bombers from Enterprise attacked Hiryu at 5 p.m. For bombs hit the carrier. Like the others, it caught fire immediately. By evening, Hiryu was a burning wreck, dead in the water. By sunset on June 4, all 4 Japanese carriers were sinking or burning. The pride of the Imperial Navy was gone. Ships that had seemed invincible that morning were now coffins of steel, slipping beneath the waves. Japan lost 248 aircraft and over 3,000 men. Pilots, mechanics, sailors, some of Japan's best, went down with the ships. America lost 1 carrier, Yorktown, and 307 men. The Battle of Midway was over in less than a day. The main action, the destruction of the 4 carriers, took only about 5 hours from the first American attack at 10:20 a.m. to the final attack on Hiryu at 5 p.m. 5 hours that changed the war. And it had all started with a torn typewriter ribbon. In the code room in Honolulu, the team received confirmation. All 4 enemy carriers destroyed. Midway secure. They did not cheer. They just sat quietly, exhausted, barely able to believe what had happened. Commander Rockefort walked over to Margaret's desk. He was so tired he could barely stand. "You did this," he said softly. "You started this." Margaret shook her head. "No, sir. Everyone did this. But you saw what no one else saw." The next day, Rockefort called a meeting. His face was serious. "What happened here stays here," he said. "You will tell no one. Not the newspapers. Not your families. Not your friends. If anyone asks how we knew where the Japanese would attack, you say we got lucky." He paused. "History will have to wait for the truth." The victory at Midway was immediately classified. The decoded messages, the code-breaking methods, even the existence of the Honolulu Code Room, all sealed as top secret. For Margaret, the silence was hard. She had imagined there might be some recognition. Maybe a medal, maybe just a thank you in an official report. Instead, she was told to destroy her notes. Rockefort locked the torn typewriter ribbon in a safe. She watched it disappear. Weeks later, newsreels in American movie theaters showed the victory at Midway. They praised the brave pilots. They praised the admirals. They called it American courage and luck. No one mentioned the code breakers. No one mentioned a woman in a typing pool. Margaret clipped a newspaper photo of the burning Japanese carriers. She put it in her journal. Beneath it, she wrote, "Sometimes victory has no name." The Battle of Midway changed everything. Before Midway, Japan was winning. After Midway, Japan was losing. Japan never recovered from the loss of 4 carriers and their experienced pilots. It could not build ships fast enough to replace them. Meanwhile, American shipyards built more and more carriers. Every American victory that followed, Guadalcanal, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, traced back to Midway. And Midway happened because American code breakers could read Japanese messages. The code-breaking success at Midway became a blueprint for the rest of the war. Similar techniques were used against German codes in the Atlantic. Intelligence became as important as bullets. But the people who did this work remained invisible. Commander Rockefort was transferred away from Honolulu. His role in the victory was hidden for decades. Lieutenant Davis returned to Washington. Margaret stayed in Honolulu until late 1943, still typing intercepts, still forbidden to speak. The war ended in August 1945. Margaret signed a non-disclosure agreement that forbade her from ever discussing what she had done. Then she went home to Chicago. In Chicago, Margaret found work as a secretary at an insurance company. She typed letters and filed papers. Her co-workers knew she had been in the Navy during the war, but they assumed she had been a nurse or a clerk. She never corrected them. How could she explain? How could she tell them she had helped break the most important code of the Pacific War? That her discovery had helped sink 4 aircraft carriers? It sounded absurd. Even to her. The first few months back home were the hardest. She would wake up at 5 a.m. out of habit, ready to walk to the code room. Then she would remember, the war was over. There was no code room anymore. No urgent intercepts. No racing against time. Just ordinary life. She would lie in bed, listening to her mother cooking breakfast downstairs, and feel oddly empty. She had been part of something important. She had mattered. Now she was just another young woman looking for work. Her family asked about Hawaii. She told them it was beautiful. Hot. Lots of palm trees. She did not tell them about the blackout curtains, the 18-hour shifts, the moment the typewriter ribbon tore. She could not. She married a quiet man named Robert Howard in 1947. He worked in shipping, handling cargo manifests and bills of lading. He was kind and steady. He never asked too many questions about her time in the Navy. They had 2 children, a daughter born in 1949, and a son in 1951. Margaret stayed home with them, like most women did in the 1950s. She cooked and cleaned and helped with homework. Sometimes, late at night after everyone was asleep, she would sit at the kitchen table and think about the war. About Rockefort and Davis and the code room, about the sound of typewriters and the smell of cigarette smoke. She wondered what had happened to the others. Were they keeping the secret too? She never spoke about her time in the Navy, not even to her husband. On her dresser, she kept one small reminder, an old typewriter key that she had polished smooth. Sometimes, when the house was empty, she would type meaningless rows of numbers, just to hear the sound. Click 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 ding. The rhythm was comforting. It reminded her of who she had been. Her children grew up never knowing what their mother had done. To them, she was just mom, the one who packed their lunches and drove them to school and made sure they did their chores. In 1960, she read a newspaper article about the Battle of Midway. It said the battle was won through brilliant strategy and American luck. No mention of code breakers. No mention of her. She clipped the article and put it in a box marked 1942. Beneath it, she placed a photograph of herself in uniform, young, unsmiling, eyes steady. Her daughter found the box once, when Margaret was in the hospital with pneumonia in 1975. "Mom, I found this old photo of you," she said. "You look so serious. What did you do in the Navy?" "Just typing," Margaret said. "Nothing important." Her daughter accepted this answer. She put the box back in the closet. The secret stayed locked inside Margaret. Sometimes she wondered if she was the only one who remembered. If everyone else had forgotten. If perhaps it had never mattered as much as she thought. But then she would remember the day the victory cables came in. The way Rockefort had looked at her. The weight of knowing they had done something that changed history. It had mattered. Even if no one knew. In 1982, after decades of secrecy, the U.S. Navy began declassifying files about codebreaking during World War II. A historian named John Prados was researching the Battle of Midway. He found a strange note in an old file, discovery of additive repetition by clerical staff. No name. No details. Just that one line. He tracked down surviving members of the Honolulu Code team. Most were elderly or had passed away. Finally, he found a name on an old personnel roster, Howard, M., clerical staff. He found her address. She was living in a small apartment in Chicago, a widow now, 71 years old. He knocked on her door with a stack of yellowed papers. "Mrs. Howard," he said, "I think you helped win the Battle of Midway." She smiled faintly. "I typed some numbers. That's all." He asked if he could interview her. She refused. "It was a team," she said. "The ribbon is gone. It doesn't matter anymore." Margaret Howard died in 1989, age 71. She never received official recognition for her discovery. 3 years later, when more files were released, historians found her pencil marks on the original intercept copies, small dots beside repeated number groups, exactly as she had described. Naval historians finally acknowledged that those markings led to the first breakthrough in JN 25B. But by then, she was gone. Today, in the National Cryptologic Museum in Maryland, there is a small display case. Inside is a torn piece of fabric, faded and brown with age. The label reads, Evidence Number 14, Typewriter Ribbon, May 1942. Most visitors walk past it without stopping. It does not look like much. Just an old ribbon from an old typewriter. But on that ribbon, if you look closely with a magnifying glass, you can see the ghost impressions. Numbers printed on top of numbers. The faint shadows that revealed Japan's secret. Next to the ribbon is a small card with a single sentence. This ribbon helped identify repetition in Japanese naval codes, leading to the Allied victory at Midway. No name. No photograph. Nothing about Margaret. But somewhere in those faded ink marks are her fingerprints. Proof that she was there, proof that she saw what others missed. History usually remembers the people in charge. The generals, the admirals, the presidents. It forgets the people who did the actual work. Margaret Howard was not a genius mathematician. She was not a trained code breaker. She was a 24-year-old typist who noticed patterns. But her observation started the chain of events that won the most important naval battle of the Pacific War. A battle that sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers in one day, killed over 3,000 Japanese sailors, destroyed 248 aircraft, turned the tide of the Pacific War, saved countless American lives, led directly to Japan's eventual defeat. All because a typewriter ribbon tore at the right moment, and one woman was paying attention. The lesson is simple: small details matter. Ordinary people can change history. And sometimes the most important victories happen in quiet rooms, by people whose names we will never know. Margaret Howard is not in any history textbook. There are no statues of her. No movies about her life. But in a climate-controlled vault, a torn ribbon remains, silent proof that even the smallest act of attention can change the world.